Gentlelady yields back. We'll now go to the gentleman from Arkansas, the Vice Chair of the full committee, Mr. Hill, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I commend you and the task force and our Capital Markets Subcommittee for the good work in this excellent panel. Professor Cunningham, great to see you. I've read all of your books, so I recommend them, and there's no need to send me a fee for that. I just think if you're interested in investment practices, governance, or corporate finance, you need to read Larry Cunningham. And terrific to see my good friend, Attorney General Ellison, back at our committee.
Likewise.
These days, it seems like our SEC is more the Securities and Environment Commission instead of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And we need to think long and hard about that, because the commission under its current leadership wants to become America's green regulator because there's not consensus legislatively about how to fully address climate. And mandating ESG disclosures for public and private companies, in my view, is drifting far from the statutory mission of the commission. Let me be clear, I have no problem if a company wants to make climate or other ESG disclosures. They're perfectly in their rights to do that. In fact, as a former private and public company director and C-suite executive, they've got a statutory and fiduciary responsibility to do that right now under current law to make sure that the investment community understands their strategies that have a outstanding human resources policy, supply chain, resiliency, and capital allocation. So if ESG factors are material to that investment decision, our law covers that today. No regulatory mandate is necessary. And to my good friend from Minnesota, I don't believe that anyone's proposing to ignore ESG to their peril, I think was your quote. In fact, we're for crafting practical, effective, cost-effective, particularly responses driven by those market participants. Mr. Ellison, you know, if a publicly traded company spends an insignificant amount of money on electricity, let's say, it's kind of hard to think about that. I'm just picking a hypothetical example. I know lawyers don't like hypothetical examples. Should, you know, and as they consider disclosing it, if it's not material to them, is that really something they should spend a lot of time on? I mean, it's that practical aspect of materiality.
If something's not material, then it need not be considered. But so often, ESG considerations are material.
Mm-hmm. But so I think, don't you think that fiduciary statutory obligation of that C-suite and that board is there now to make that determination, as opposed to it being literally a mandate across the board for every public and private company, one size fits all? I mean, really.
Well, let's go back to 2008. You know, we had the mortgage crisis.
Yep.
I think part of why we got into that crisis is that we did not have enough people thinking about the 360-degree risks that were
Fair point. I don't want to take up my time doing that, but I do want to thank you for our work together on credit inclusion.
Absolutely.
And we did that bill together during Mr. Hensling's chairmanship to add additional data for rental payments and utility payments to let more people have access to credit. You still like that idea?
Yes.
Good. Mr. Allen, excellent testimony, fantastic list of recommendations. Can you talk about the potential consequences if the SEC were to require companies to disclose non-material climate information?
Thank you for the question. I think the biggest consequence would be, well, several consequences. There would be first significant costs imposed on public companies. In our 3 comment letters to the SEC, we detailed our members' cost concerns. I think another concern, and I think you alluded to this earlier, is the impact on private companies, small businesses, minority-owned businesses within companies' supply chains.
Yeah.
Under the
we can't, I mean, I hear
requirement.
from businesses all the time, they can't comply with the conflict mineral rule now, technically, all the way down the supply chain. How could they do it? Could they really be able to do this? Scope 3? Scope 3, is that realistic?
No, I think a lot of these smaller ventures, these local firms, farmers and others would be unable to meet this burden.
Let me switch gears. Mr. Copeland, you know, in this committee and in our executive branch, we typically push back about extraterritorial things that we think hurt American performance, American systems where, you know, some Europeans don't understand that we're organized a little differently here. What are your concerns about the potential impact and cost to U.S. businesses from this European set of mandates that they plan on imposing on U.S. business?
I'm very concerned with it, and I think this committee should be, and this Congress should be. Basically, in a nutshell, what they're talking about doing in Europe is creating a form of climate disclosure regulation that applies not only to subsidiaries of American companies operating in Europe, but to the parent companies themselves. So they're going to.
Thank you. My time's expired. I yield back. But if you have more, would you please respond in writing on that question? Thank you. Yield back.